Hello and welcome to Magic the Gathering Arena. I'm Amy the Amazonian and this video is a guide to the Color Challenge. I'll be walking through each game and explaining as I go. The Color Challenge is the second part of Magic Arena's new player experience, where it will cover mechanics and abilities that weren't a part of the tutorial. There are multiple ways to complete the Color Challenge, and you don't need to follow my instructions exactly in order to win each game. But if you do follow my instructions, you'll get through them with no problem. If you've already played through the Color Challenge and are looking to try to play it again, you can actually access it by going to either Learn More in the top right and clicking on Master the Color Challenge, or from the home page, going to the Play button, clicking the flag for events, and then going to the Color Challenge there. If you'd like to skip the Color Challenge and unlock all play modes, you can either go to the top right and click Adjust Options, or press Escape to get to the Options menu, then go to Account. It will give you an option to unlock all play modes. I don't have this option on my screen because I've already played through the Color Challenge, but that's where you'll be able to find it. For this video, I'll be playing through the Color Challenge in the order white, blue, black, red, and then green, and be going left to right for each segment of the Color Challenge. That means I'll be starting with the white versus red. This is the same order you'd probably play it if you were a new player engaging in the Color Challenge. If you're a returning player, you can actually play any of the challenges individually. Against the red deck, you're going to want to start by playing a Plains on your first turn. You have no other actions that you can take beyond that, so it will pass back to your opponent. They're going to attack you with a Goblin, but you're going to do very little blocking during this game. On your second turn, play a Plains, and then the Impassioned Orator. The Impassioned Orator has an ability where, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. In your hand, you have 2 cards called Hallowed Priest. These have an ability where, whenever you gain life, if this is on the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on Hallowed Priest. On your third turn, play a Plains, and then one of the Hallowed Priests. When you cast the Hallowed Priest, it will enter the battlefield and you'll gain a life. Don't attack on this turn. On your fourth turn, play another Plains, and then the Impassioned Orator. You're going to want to play this first. And then the Hallowed Priest. Because you've played the Impassioned Orator first, you're going to have more life gain triggers, and you're going to have a larger Hallowed Priest. So attack with the one that came into play last turn. It has 5 power and 5 toughness, so there's no good way for the red deck to block you. So they're just going to block you with a single Tin Street Cadet, and it's going to die as a result. On your 5th turn, play a Plains, and then cast Shrine Keeper. The Shrine Keeper is going to come into play, and you're going to gain 2 life and get 2 counters on each of the Hallowed Priests. Attack with both of them. Your opponent only has 15 life remaining, and they're going to play very aggressively here by attacking with both their Hurloon Minotaur and Volcanic Dragon. Don't block. And on your 6th turn, you actually don't need to do anything other than attack. So attack with all of your creatures, which will deal enough damage to end the game. Now we're going to move on to white versus black. You're going to notice that each of these opponents plays different style of cards because they're playing different colors of mana. They're going to start with a Typhoid Rat. This has an ability called Death Touch. A card with Death Touch will destroy a creature by dealing any damage to it. So 1 damage from a 1 power Death Toucher is enough to destroy even a 5/5 creature, a creature with 5 power and 5 toughness. On your first turn, play a Plains. On your second turn, play another Plains, and then cast Impassioned Orator. The Malakir Cullblade, which your opponent played, has the ability, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, it gets a +1/+1 counter. This means that you're going to want to avoid letting any of your creatures die, so this doesn't get any bigger. On your third turn, play a Plains and then cast another Impassioned Orator. Then attack with an Impassioned Orator. Because you're gaining life, the damage being dealt by the Typhoid Rats isn't going to make a big difference. On your fourth turn, play a Plains, then play Hallowed Priest. You'll gain 2 life and it will get 2 +1/+1 counters. Then attack with both Impassioned Orators. The opponent will play the Sengir Vampire. Whenever a creature dealt damage by a Sengir Vampire this turn dies, meaning this creature itself, you put a +1/+1 counter on Sengir Vampire. Do not block, and then go to the next turn. On your 5th turn, you can handle this a couple different ways, but I think my favorite way to do it is to put the Angelic Reward on your Hallowed Priest. It's going to get +3/+3 and flying, meaning that only the Sengir Vampire can block it. Just attack with the Hallowed Priest. Don't block. And then on your 6th turn, go to combat. You can play a land first, it doesn't really matter, and attack with everything. You'll deal lethal damage and win the game. Now we're going to move on to white versus blue. For this battle, you're going to be seeing a few new cards and abilities. So this is a card called Moorland Inquisitor. It's a 2 mana, 2 power, 2 toughness card with an ability that you can activate anytime you have priority, meaning at instant speed. For 3 mana, you can give it First Strike until end of turn. First Strike means that it will deal damage before the normal damage stage. We're going to start turn 1 by playing a Plains. You'll see a little bit more about what I'm talking about when we start getting into combat. On your 2nd turn, play a Moorland Inquisitor. On your 3rd turn, play a 2nd Moorland Inquisitor. Then attack with the one you had played on the previous turn. On your 4th turn, play your Plains and then go to combat. Attack with both Moorland Inquisitors. The one that's being blocked by the Coral Merfolk, click on it and activate its ability to give it First Strike. This means that it will receive damage, the Coral Merfolk, before it can deal damage back to the Moorland Inquisitor. That's the magic of First Strike. After combat completes, just pass through and go back to your turn. On your 5th turn, play a land, and then go to combat. Attack with both Moorland Inquisitors. The one that's being blocked, use Tactical Advantage to give it +2/+2 until end of turn. Then click on it to give it First Strike. You're going to do something very similar this turn. Go to combat, attack with both. The one that's being blocked, and we'll actually do it in the other order. Click on it to give it First Strike, and then cast Tactical Advantage, targeting it, to give it +2/+2. You're going to be cleanly eliminating these air elementals as blockers by doing this. Now on this turn, we can continue to do the same thing. Go to combat, attack with both Moorland Inquisitors. The one that's being blocked. Activate its ability. Then use this tactical advantage to give it +2/+2. Your opponent's going to play Winged Words a couple times here to draw a bunch more cards, so they'll have creatures to play. But they don't have a big creature out anymore. Go to combat. And attack with both Moorland Inquisitors. The one that's being blocked, click on it to activate its ability. Give it first strike. And then play the Hallowed Priest. Your opponent is playing 2 Cloudkin Seers this turn. Now that you've drawn a 6th land, you can put that into play, and then go to combat. Attack with both Moorland Inquisitors. Each of them is being blocked by a Cloudkin Seer, so click on the first one, activate its ability, then the second one, and activate its ability to give them both first strike. Your opponent has 2 Windstorm Drakes out there, each going to give each other 1 additional power. On your turn, play a Plains, then the Goring Ceratops. Don't attack on this turn. Goring Ceratops has an ability called Double Strike and gives other creatures you attack with Double Strike as well. Double Strike means that it deals both first strike and regular combat damage. On this turn, play a Plains, and then use Bond of Discipline. You don't actually have to play the land first, it's just good to do it. Go to combat, and attack with everything. And you'll destroy them in first strike damage. I believe that even if you skip casting the Bond of Discipline, you'll still deal lethal damage, but it feels good to keep all of your creatures safe. Now we're going to go white versus green. The battle against green is pretty interesting because they're going to be playing some very big creatures. On your first turn, play a Plains. You have a new card called Fencing Ace here, which has Double Strike. That means it will deal both normal and first strike combat damage. Something interesting about this ability is when used in combination with a buff that gives something like, let's say, +2/+2, this buff will apply for both the first strike and the normal combat damage. On your third turn, play a Plains, and then a Fencing Ace. Go to combat and attack with the Fencing Ace. And when it is blocked, use Tactical Advantage to give it +2/+2. It will deal 3 damage in the first strike phase and 3 normal damage, taking out the Treetop Recluse. Play a Plains on your 4th turn, and then attack with both Fencing Aces. The one that's being blocked, use Tactical Advantage to give +2/+2. And then click through combat. Now your opponent has played the Gigantosaurus, but you've drawn Pacifism. Play land and then cast Pacifism to make it so the Gigantosaurus can't block. Attack with both your Fencing Aces to deal 2 damage by each of them to bring Vivian down to 14 life. There's now a Ward Scale Crocodile. This has an ability called Hexproof, which means you cannot target it with spells or abilities. So if you tried to cast Pacifism, you would not be able to target the Ward Scale Crocodile. On your turn, play a Plains, and then attack with both Fencing Aces. The one that's being blocked by the Ward Scale Crocodile, use Tactical Advantage on your Fencing Ace. This way your fencing ace will survive combat and destroy the ward scale crocodile. Your opponent's going to play another Gigantosaurus. So play Pacifism. Make it so it's not able to attack or block. Then attack with both your fencing aces. You can finish the game this turn. Cast Angelic Reward targeting either of your fencing aces, and then attack to deal lethal damage. You only need to attack with the enchanted fencing ace, but it's more fun to attack with both. Now you're going to notice I'm not going to play through this final challenge. That's because it's going to be different for every single player. To complete the final question mark battle, you'll just be playing against another player. Try your best to win, but if you don't, I believe you'll still be completing the challenge, and you'll be able to move on to the next color in the color challenge. Next up, I'll be playing through the blue portion of the color challenge, starting with blue versus black. To start your first turn, play an island. The cards you have in your hand are all flyers. This one reduces the cost of other flyers you might cast, and this one draws a card when it enters the battlefield. On your second turn, play an island. The other card you have, which you won't be able to cast for a while, is Windstorm Drake. This is a 5-mana, 3/3 flyer that gives other flyers more power. Your opponent is playing a lot of Shambling Goblins. These have an ability that, when they die, they cause -1/-1 to be applied to one of your creatures. This would kill one of your Cloudkin Seers. Play an island, and then cast Warden of Avos Isle. On your turn, play an island, and then cast Cloudkin Seer, which will cause you to draw a card, and then cast another Cloudkin Seer. Attack in with the Warden of Avos Isle. It's very important that you don't block the Shambling Goblins. In fact, you don't need to block at all. Declare no blockers. On your turn, play an island, and then Warden of Avos Isle. This is reducing the cost of all of your creatures with flying. Cast the Windstorm Drake. This is going to give additional power to each of your flyers. Attack with the Warden of Avos Isle and the 2 Cloudkin Seers. Your opponent only has 9 life remaining. On your turn, all you have to do is go to combat and attack with everything. You only need to attack with 3 of them, but it's more fun to attack with all of them. After that, you're going to go blue versus green. On your first turn, play an island and use your 1 blue mana to cast Wall of Runes. This is a card with Defender, which means that it cannot attack. It also has an ability where it enters the battlefield and you scry 1. This means you're going to look at the top card of your library and choose to keep it on top or put it to the bottom. In this case, you want to put it to the bottom. That's because it's an island, and you do not need any more mana to cast the cards in your hand. On your turn, play an island. Your opponent has played a Elysian Caryatid. They're going to be able to use this to generate more mana than just can be generated by their lands to play bigger creatures faster. On your turn, play an island, and then the Warden of Avos Isle. Your opponent now has 3 of these Elysian Caryatids out, meaning that they're going to be able to make a lot of mana next turn. On your turn, play the island, and then cast the first Cloudkin Seer. Then cast the second Cloudkin Seer. Each of those are going to draw a card. Attack with your Warden of Avosile. Now your opponent has played a card called Sentinel Spider, which has an ability called Reach. This means that this creature is able to block a creature with flying. Your opponent's attacked in with the Elysian Caryatide. Declare your Wall of Runes as a blocker. On your turn, play an island, and then use an Unsummon on the Sentinel Spider. This will return it to your opponent's hand, and give you an opportunity to attack in with your 3 flyers. Pass through to the end of your turn. Wait until the Sentinel Spider resolves on the battlefield, and pass to attacks. When your opponent attacks, use your Wall of Runes to block the Greenwood Sentinel to prevent 2 damage. And then, at the end of their turn, use Unsummon on their Sentinel Spider. On your 6th turn, play an island, go to combat, attack with your 3 flyers, and then cast the Frilled Sea Serpent. This has an ability, which costs 7 mana to activate, that makes it unblockable. On your turn, play an island, and then activate the Frilled Sea Serpent's ability. It now can't be blocked. Attack in with the Frilled Sea Serpent and at least 2 of your flyers. I'm going to say, attack in with all 3. Why not? One of them will be blocked by the spider, but the others are going to make it through, and you'll defeat your opponent. Next, we're going to be doing blue versus white. On your turn, play an island. And on your 2nd turn, play a 2nd island, followed by the Waterkin Shaman. The Waterkin Shaman gets +1/+1 whenever a creature with flying enters the battlefield under your control. This only lasts until the end of that turn. Play an island, and then cast Cloudkin Seer. This will give the Waterkin Shaman +1/+1 until end of turn. Then attack in with it. Because Fencing Ace has Double Strike, both of your creatures will die. They've cast Pacifism on your Cloudkin Seer, but you actually have an answer to this. On your turn, play an island, and then use an Unsummon on your own Cloudkin Seer. This will return it to your hand and put the Pacifism into their graveyard. Recast Cloudkin Seer. You'll draw another card. Your opponent's played another Fencing Ace and a Knight's Pledge. On your turn, play an island and go to combat. You'll want to attack with your Cloudkin Seer. Then end the turn. Your opponent is using another Pacifism on your Cloudkin Seer. They're also going to attack with their Fencing Ace. Use an Unsummon on the Fencing Ace to return it to their hand and put the Knight's Pledge into the graveyard. They'll be able to replay this Fencing Ace. You can also use your 2nd Unsummon to put your Cloudkin Seer back into your hand. On your 6th turn, play an island, and then the Riddlemaster Sphinx. This has an ability which is going to return a creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. So you'll put the Fencing Ace back into your opponent's hand. On your turn, attack with the Riddlemaster Sphinx to deal 5 damage to your opponent. Then play an island and cast the first Cloudkin Seer, followed by another one. When your opponent attacks you, don't block. You'll take 6 damage, but because you haven't been hit very much this game, you can easily survive it. On your turn, Play an island. Then play either the Windstorm Drake or the Cloudkin Seer, doesn't matter the order, but you'll want to cast both of them. Attack with all 3 flyers able to attack this turn. When your opponent attacks in, you do not need to block. You can if you want to, it's not really going to make a difference, because on this next turn, you just need to go to combat, attack with at least 1 creature, and win the game. The last part of the blue color challenge is going to be up against red. This is excluding, of course, the part where you have to play against a random player, but that's going to be different for everybody. So next we're going to do blue versus red. You'll be going first. On your first turn, play an island. It will then pass the turn automatically to your opponent. On your second turn, play another island, and then cast Waterkin Shaman. You don't want to block the Tin Street Cadet because it has an ability which, when it becomes blocked, they get a 1/1 red goblin creature token. Also, your Waterkin Shaman would die, and you're going to be dealing more damage with it to your opponent than they'll be dealing to you. On your turn, play an island, and then play another Waterkin Shaman. Go to combat and attack with your Waterkin Shaman. Then end the turn. You can skip through all of the prompts to use your unsummon here. And when it comes back to your turn, play an island. Then play Cloudkin Seer. This is going to make your Waterkin Shaman a little bit bigger. Go to combat and attack with both Waterkin Shaman. Your opponent's going to block with the Spellgorger Weird, and that's perfectly fine. Let the 2 trade. When your opponent attacks in with the Tin Street Cadet, do not block it. And take the damage. And go back to your turn. On your turn, play your 5th land, and then use the Windstorm Drake. This is going to allow your Waterkin Shaman to get a little bit bigger, and it's also going to permanently give a bit of a boost to your Cloudkin Seer's power. Windstorm Drake gives +1/+0 to other creatures you control with flying. Your Waterkin Shaman is going to trade with the Spellgorger Weird. And your opponent is going to use Act of Treason to temporarily take control of your Windstorm Drake. They're also going to kill your Cloudkin Seer. On your turn, go to combat and attack with the Windstorm Drake. When your opponent tries to use Act of Treason on your Windstorm Drake, cast Glint to give it hexproof and +0/+3 until end of turn. The hexproof means that the Act of Treason is going to fizzle on the stack. It no longer has a valid target, so it's going to go straight to the graveyard. This way, your opponent is not dealing enough damage to you to outpace you while you're attacking with your Windstorm Drake. On your turn, cast the Cloudkin Seer. You'll draw a card, it'll be a land, and play that land. Then go to combat and attack with your Windstorm Drake. When your opponent tries to shock your Cloudkin Seer, use Glint to protect it. Once again, giving it hexproof. It also gives it +0/+3, and those 3 additional toughness are going to be enough to resist that damage, even if it could be hurt in a different way. They're going to use Inescapable Blaze on you, dealing damage directly to your face, but it's not going to be enough to kill you. On your turn, after not blocking, go to combat and attack with both your creatures to deal lethal damage. Congratulations, that is the last scripted battle in the blue color challenge. The last one, you just need to play the game with the deck that they give you, and it's going to be different every single time. Try your best using the things you've learned by playing through the rest of this color challenge, and hopefully you'll win. Next up, I'll be playing through the black part of the color challenge, starting with black versus green. You'll be going first in this game, so on your first turn, play a swamp, and then cast Typhoid Rats. Typhoid Rats has Death Touch, meaning any damage that it deals is enough to destroy a creature. On your second turn, you're going to want to play a swamp. Then, cast Malakir Cullblade. Attack in with your Typhoid Rats. Your opponents played the Woodland Mystic. This can tap for mana, which means that they can use it to cast bigger creatures quicker in the game. On your turn, play a swamp, then cast Malakir Cullblade. You want this out on the battlefield before you do this next thing, which is cast Compound Fracture to give -1/-1 to the Mystic. This reduces its toughness to 0, which causes it to die. This also puts +1/+1 counters on both of your Cullblades. Attack in with your Rats and your Cullblade. Your opponent's going to cast another Woodland Mystic. So play a Swamp, and then use a second Compound Fracture on the Mystic. This is going to increase your damage coming through when you attack with all 3 of these creatures. Your opponent's going to cast another Woodland Mystic. For your turn, play a land, and then attack with all 3 creatures. They block with their Woodland Mystic, killing it and the Typhoid Rats, and putting +1/+1 counters on your 2 Malakir Cullblades. And then on this next turn, just attack with both Cullblades. Congrats, you've won the game! Next up, we're going to play black versus white. In this game, you'll be starting on the play, so play a swamp and then cast Sanitarium Skeleton. This creature has an ability that allows you to bring it back from the graveyard to your hand, though you're not going to be making too much use of that ability in this game. Play a second land, go to attacks, and attack with your Sanitarium Skeleton. Then end your turn. On your opponent's turn, they're going to play a Shrine Keeper. On your opponent's turn, use Cruel Cut to destroy the Shrine Keeper. Then on your turn, play the Savage Gorger and attack with the Sanitarium Skeleton. Because you dealt damage to your opponent and they lost life this turn, Savage Gorger gets a +1/+1 counter. This creature is going to get bigger and bigger through this game, which is going to end up winning you the game. On your turn, play a land, cast a Sanitarium Skeleton, and then attack with both the Sanitarium Skeleton and the Savage Gorger. When they block with the Impassioned Orator, use Compound Fracture to reduce both the power and toughness of the Orator by 1. This means that the Orator will die, your Sanitarium Skeleton will not. On your next turn, play a swamp, and then attack in with the Savage Gorger. Your opponent's playing a Hallowed Priest, gaining a life and getting a +1/+1 counter on the Priest. Because you already have a Compound Fracture in your graveyard, you're going to want to cast it targeting the Impassioned Orator. This is going to stop the Orator from gaining any more life. Then, play your swamp and attack in with all 3 creatures. Your Sanitarium Skeleton may have died, but you can activate its ability from the graveyard to put it back in your hand, and then play it again. When they attack in, you don't need to block. On your next turn, go to combat and attack with all 3 creatures. You can then play the Savage Gorger. You don't need to, but it's a little bit safer because it means you'll have the maximum number of creatures on the board. Don't block, and then on your next turn, attack in with at least one of the Savage Gorgers. And you've won the game. As a note, there's a lot of different ways to win this particular battle, so if you did it a different way and you still won, that still works. You don't have to follow my instructions exactly. Next up is going to be black versus red. On your first turn, play a swamp, and then cast Sanitarium Skeleton. Your opponent is going to play the Goblin Assailant, and on your turn, play a land, go to combat, and attack with the Sanitarium Skeleton. When they block with the Assailant, use a Compound Fracture, targeting the Assailant to give it -1/-1 until end of turn. This is going to mean your Sanitarium Skeleton survives combat, and their Goblin does not. On their turn, you still have 1 mana up, and you can use Compound Fracture to kill their Spellgorger Weird. This gives -2/-2 because you had already cast another Compound Fracture this game. On your turn, play a land and then attack with Sanitarium Skeleton. And just pass through the turn. You'll be also passing through your opponent's next turn. You don't have anything to do in reaction to their Spellgorger Weird. On your turn, play a swamp, go to combat, and attack with the Sanitarium Skeleton. When they block, use Unlikely Aid to give your creature +2/+0 and Indestructible. Indestructible means what you think it would mean, which is that it can't be destroyed until the end of the turn. Next up, play your Vampire Opportunist. This has an activated ability which can just easily reduce your opponent's life total by 2 while gaining you 2 life. On your next turn, play a swamp, and then attack with both creatures. Whichever one happens to be blocked, use Unlikely Aid to protect it and give it +2/+0 and Indestructible. Both your creatures are still on the board. On your next turn, play a swamp and then cast Nightmare. This is a large flying creature that gets bigger with the number of swamps you control. Attack in with both your creatures. On your next turn, play the swamp before you go to combat, so you have an additional damage in the air, and attack with both the Sanitarium Skeleton and the Nightmare. Your opponent now only has 7 life remaining. They're going to use Shock on your skeleton at the end of your turn. Activate the Sanitarium Skeleton's ability and put it back into your hand. As a note, you don't actually need to do this because you don't need to cast it, but it's fun to do. Now, attack in with the Nightmare and deal the final 7 damage. And finally, we're going to be playing black versus blue. Your opponent's going to start out the game by playing a small flyer. You're not going to be able to block this unless you get your own flyer out. On your turn, play a swamp, and then Typhoid Rats. This has Death Touch, meaning that any amount of damage this creature deals is going to be enough to destroy another creature. On your turn, play a swamp, and then your Malakir Cullblade. Go to attackers and attack in with your Typhoid Rat. Your opponent's going to block with the Sworn Guardian, which means that it's going to die because your rat had Death Touch. Your Malakir Cullblade is going to get +1/+1. Next, play a swamp, and then cast Mardu Outrider. Choose to discard a swamp when you cast this spell. Now attack in with the Malakir Cullblade. Your opponent has a lot of small flyers on the battlefield now. So you're going to have to do your best to just attack through them. But first, you can use Skeleton Archer. When this comes into play, it deals 1 damage to a target of your choosing. Target the Cloudkin Seer. This causes your Cull Blade to get a little bit bigger, so when you attack in with both, they don't have a good option for blocking. They're going to keep on playing more cards and drawing more cards and attacking in the air. On your turn, play a Swamp and then use Compound Fracture to take out a Cloudkin Seer. It's best to take out the one that could block this turn. Then attack with all 3 of your creatures. Your Cull Blade keeps getting bigger and bigger, but it's going to be put back into your hand. This is going to reset all the +1/+1 counters you would put on it. But your opponent has left themselves open to a lethal attack. Go to combat and just attack with both of your creatures. Congratulations, you've beaten blue. And you've made it through the part of the black color challenge that I can guide you through. The final game is going to be up against a mystery opponent, so take your deck into the fray and do your best with it. I hope you're ready for red. Next up, we'll be playing red in the color challenge, starting with red versus blue. Start by playing a mountain, and then your Tin Street Cadet. Tin Street Cadet is the kind of card that your opponent is not going to want to block unless they can do so safely and repeatedly, because when it becomes blocked, it gets a 1/1 red goblin creature token on the battlefield for you, as you can see over here on the right. On your second turn, play a second Tin Street Cadet, and then pass the turn. Your opponent's going to attack in with the Sworn Guardian, and you can just let it hit you. On your third turn, play Goblin Gathering. This is going to give you 2 goblin tokens. You can skip attacking here. And on your fourth turn, play Goblin Gathering, which is going to make 3 goblins this time, and then a Tin Street Cadet. Pass the turn back to your opponent. Now for these Sworn Guardians that are attacking you, you can block them, but you don't need to, so don't bother. Click No Blocks. On your turn, play a land and then cast Raid Bombardment, and then attack with everything. By the way, if you don't press the Attack All button, you can also attack with groups by clicking on the number next to them for tokens, or pressing Spacebar to attack with all your creatures. When you attack in, the Raid Bombardment is going to deal damage for each of these attackers. And because one of your Tin Street Cadets was blocked, it's going to generate a Goblin token. You don't need to block here, so don't bother. And on your turn, attack with everything. You only have to attack with 5 creatures, but it's really easy to press Attack All, so you may as well. Now we're going to play red versus black. On your first turn, play a mountain and cast Tin Street Cadet. When this creature is blocked, you're going to get a 1/1 red goblin creature token. On your second turn, play a mountain, cast Goblin Tunneler, and then attack with Tin Street Cadet. Goblin Tunneler allows you to make a creature unblockable as long as it has power 2 or less. This does require tapping the creature, so you won't be able to attack with it on the same turn you use that ability. On your third turn, play a mountain, cast Raid Bombardment, and then activate the Goblin Tunneler, targeting your Tin Street Cadet, and attack in. This will deal 2 damage, 1 from Raid Bombardment and 1 from the Cadet. On your 4th turn, cast Raid Bombardment after playing a land, and then use Shock to kill the Scathed Zombie that is untapped, so it can't block you. Then attack with both of your creatures. This is going to deal 6 total damage. 2 from each Raid Bombardment, and then 2 damage from your creature's power. Now your opponent is able to block you really effectively. So, on this turn, play a mountain, activate the Goblin Tunneler to make the Tin Street Cadet unable to block, and then attack in, dealing 3 total damage. Then cast the other Goblin Tunneler. You don't need to block here. You press no blocks. And then on your turn, cast the Nest Robber and attack with everything. I believe you still have lethal even if you don't play the Nest Robber, but the more, the merrier. Next up, we're going to be playing red versus green. On your first turn, play a mountain and then skip to the end of your turn. On your opponent's turn, they're going to play a Woodland Mystic. You're going to want to cast Shock to kill it. This is going to deny them the ability to use it to make more mana to cast big scary creatures. On your second turn, play the Mountain and then cast Nest Robber. This has haste, so you can attack with it on the same turn you cast it. Attack in, deal that 2 damage, and get ready to hit some more Mystics. Play a Mountain, and use Shock to destroy the Woodland Mystic. Then attack in for 2 damage with the Nest Robber. Play your 4th Mountain, and then cast Goblin Gang Leader. It's going to create 2 Goblin tokens. Now attack in with the Nest Robber. They're not going to block, so you're going to get to do 2 more damage to them. And now they have a Rumbling Baloth. This has 4 power and toughness, but you just drew a combat trick, which can give all of your creatures +2 power until end of turn. Go to combat and attack with all 4 of your creatures. This battle's scripted, so even though your opponent knows you must have something up your sleeve, they're going to block, and you can cast Burn Bright to destroy the Baloth and bring your opponent's life total down to 4. You're about to win the game, so you have 2 ways to do it. You can either cast the Volcanic Dragon and attack with it, or just attack with the creatures you have already on the battlefield, and cast Shock to deal the final 2 damage to your opponent. These games go quickly because red is very aggressive in the color challenge. Now we're going to play red versus white. Start the game by playing a mountain and passing the turn. You're not able to cast any of the creatures, and the creatures you're going to notice are kind of weird. Play another mountain, and then pass the turn. On your 3rd turn, play a Molten Ravager. This creature on its own has 0 power and 4 toughness, though you can activate it by paying 1 red mana to give it a power. When they attack with the Fencing Ace, use your Molten Ravager to block it. The Fencing Ace has double strike, so it's going to hit you with first strike and normal combat damage, but that's not going to destroy your Molten Ravager. On the next turn, play a mountain, and then another Molten Ravager. Just pass the turn. When your opponent attacks you, use 1 Molten Ravager to block 1 main Serval and the other to block the Fencing Ace. After declaring them as blockers, activate the ability of the Molten Ravager that's in front of the Fencing Ace. This will give it 1 power, which is enough to destroy it. Next, play a mountain, and then Rained Bombardment, followed by Goblin Tunneler. On this turn, attack in with both Molten Ravagers. This is going to deal 2 damage to your opponent from the Raid Bombardment, even though these have no power themselves. The main servals, by the way, have Vigilance, which means that they can attack and block because they are not required to tap when they're declared as attackers. On your next turn, play a mountain, and then cast Raid Bombardment, and attack with your 2 Molten Ravagers again. Because they didn't block, activate the abilities of the Molten Ravagers. It doesn't matter how you distribute this. You could activate it twice on one, once on the other, or all 3 on one, as I did. Deal a little bit more damage to your opponent. On this next turn, play a mountain, and just attack with all 3 creatures. This brings them down to 5 life. And they're going to let one of the Molten Ravagers go unblocked. Put 5 mana into activating the ability 5 times, so the Molten Ravager has 5 power. And this will win you the game. The final game is one that you're going to play against a random opponent, which means that the game is going to be different every time you do it. I won't be showing it on the video, but just play your best and use the things you've learned in all of the other colored challenges. Last but not least, it's time to play green. We're going to start with green versus white. On your first turn, play a forest. And on your second turn, also play a forest, but then follow up with the Elysian Caryatid. This is a creature with 1 power and 1 toughness, and the ability to generate mana by tapping. It's not going to be able to do it on the first turn you play it, because it has Summoning Sickness, but you can use it in the future. When your opponent attacks with the Sanctuary Cat, don't block. On your third turn, play a Baloth Pack Hunter. This is a 3/3 with trample that when it enters the battlefield, it makes other Baloth Pack Hunters get 2+1/+1 counters. On your next turn, play a forest and then Baloth Pack Hunter. Make sure you don't tap the Caryatid for that mana, because now that you have a creature with more than 4 power, you can actually tap it for 2 mana. Attack in with the Baloth Pack Hunter. When your opponent decides to block, you don't have to change the order in which the blockers are applied, because all 3 of them are going to die. On your turn, play a forest and then cast Rampaging Brontodon. Then attack in with Baloth Pack Hunter. Rampaging Brontodon is going to get +1/+1 when it attacks for each land you control. So to maximize your damage, start by playing a land, and then attack with everything. Your Brontodon is going to be a 13/13 with trample, meaning that any damage that is not part of destroying the creatures blocking it is going to go straight through to your opponent. And you've won the game. Now we're going to play green versus red. Start the game, play a forest, and pass your turn. And on your second turn, play a forest and then cast Elysian Caryatid. When your opponent attacks in, do not block. Your Caryatid's going to be killed by a shock, but that's okay. On your turn, play a forest and cast the other Caryatid from your hand. Once again, choose no blocks, and then play a forest. Then cast Sentinel Spider. Sentinel Spider has Vigilance, meaning that it can attack without tapping, and it has Reach, meaning that it can block a flyer. Go to combat and attack with just the Sentinel Spider. When your opponent blocks, cast Stony Strength on the Sentinel Spider. This is going to untap it, though it was never tapped, and put a +1/+1 counter on it. The +1/+1 counter means it's going to survive combat. Now use your remaining mana to cast the second Sentinel Spider from your hand. On your next turn, go to combat and attack with all 3 creatures. Then play the Baloth Pack Hunter. You have no other creatures named Baloth Pack Hunter, so it's not going to put any counters on anything. And then again, on your next turn, go to combat and attack with everything. Right here, you actually have 9 damage already coming through. To make it 10, use Stony Strength on either of your 3 unblocked creatures. That's going to be exactly lethal damage being dealt to your opponent. Next up, we're going to play against blue with our green deck. On your first turn, play a forest and then the Jungle Delver. On your second turn, play a forest and then cast Elysian Caryatid. And attack in with your Jungle Delver. Play a forest, and then attack with both your Jungle Delver and your Elysian Caryatid. Because they've blocked it, cast Stony Strength on your Jungle Delver, and then cast Stony Strength again. This way, you've turned your Jungle Delver into a 3-power, 3-toughness creature, which is big enough to kill the Sworn Guardian. On your next turn, play a forest, and then attack in just with the Jungle Delver. When they don't block it, activate its ability to put a +1/+1 counter on it. And then let the damage resolve. You can't block because both of the opponent's creatures are flyers. And on your next turn, go to combat and attack with just the Jungle Delver. Because they don't block, activate its ability to put a +1/+1 counter on it. Because this has more than 4 power, 4 or more I should say, use your Elysian Caryatid to generate 2 mana and play the other Caryatid from your hand. On this turn, play your forest, go to combat, and attack with the Jungle Delver. Let the damage resolve, and then cast Rampaging Brontodon. Your opponent's going to play another Air Elemental, but you should be able to defeat them the next turn. Go to combat, and attack with the Jungle Delver and the Rampaging Brontodon. You can attack with everything, or just the Brontodon, but there's no kill like overkill. And now our final game of the color challenge is going to be the green deck versus black. Start the game by playing a forest. On your second turn, play a forest again and then cast the Caryatid. Your opponent's not going to attack in, but on your next turn, play the Baloth Pack Hunter. This has 3 power, 3 toughness, and trample. But when your opponent attacks with the Typhoid Rats, don't block, because it has Death Touch, meaning that even though it has 1 power, it would still destroy your Pack Hunter in combat. Select no blocks. On your next turn, play a forest, and then cast Rabid Bite, selecting your Pack Hunter and one of the Cull Blades. Then, again, choose Rabid Bite, selecting your Pack Hunter and the Typhoid Rat. Now attack in with both your creatures. So choose to block the Elysian Caryatid with the Malakir Cull Blade. Next, play a forest, and then before combat, cast the Baloth Pack Hunter. This is going to make your other Pack Hunter get 2 +1/+1 counters, so it swings in for 5 damage. The Savage Gorger is big and gets bigger each turn that it deals damage to you, or that you've lost life through any means. But you're going to be able to outpace them. On your next turn, attack with the Baloth Pack Hunter. And then cast Elysian Caryatid. Your opponent is going to swing in with both of their flyers, and so all you need to do is attack with all 3 creatures. You really only need to attack with these 2 because they have trample, and all their excess damage will be dealt to the opponent. Congratulations, you've defeated all of the opponents in the color challenge. The final game in the color challenge is actually one I can't guide you through, because it's going to be different every single time you play it. In this game, you'll be playing your green deck against a random opponent in the queue. Have fun, good luck, and don't worry if you don't win. I hope that this video has been helpful, and I hope that you learned something while playing through the color challenge. If you'd like to check out my channel, you can find me at twitch.tv/Amazonian. And thank you so much to Wizards of the Coast for asking me to make this video. I hope that you all enjoy playing Magic the Gathering Arena.